Washington, Richard Reeves. He's a journalist, a historian, prize-winning author of, among other things, a book about the Kennedy administration. His latest book, Richard Nixon, Alone in the White House, will be published this fall. And we expect to be joined in a few moments by Andrei Cherny, at 26, a veteran of the White House. He served as a chief speechwriter and advisor to ex-Vice President Al Gore. As soon as Mr. Cherny is ready, we will bring him into the conversation. But Senator McCain, let me begin with you. The men that your grandfather led and your father served with have been immortalized as the greatest generation in film, Saving Private Ryan, on television, Band of Brothers. And there's an implication here, I think, that this generation had something that later generations, particularly baby boomers and so-called Generation Y, may lack. Do you buy into that idea?
I think they may have lacked it because I don't think there was the threat. Now I am of the conviction that with this tragedy and act of war that's been committed against us, when in some respects is significantly more damaging than Pearl Harbor was, that I believe Americans will respond. In my failed presidential campaign, I saw that young Americans were prepared not only to serve their neighborhood, their communities, and their country, but they were eager to, and they are eager to. And I think you're going to see young Americans galvanized with a sense of duty and purpose that will equal that of the greatest generation.
One of the challenges, though, I think, and I want to pick up on that comment in a few minutes, is that the people who fought in World War II had known hard times even before the war. They'd gone through a depression already that lasted more than 10 years. Asking them to give up something in some ironic way may have been less of a challenge than to a generation that has known nothing but peace and prosperity. Does that not make it a little harder, through no fault of later generations?
Well, I think you could turn that coin on the other side, and that is that we have so much, that there's so much at risk now that perhaps was not at risk for the greatest generation. So therefore, the urgency of this mission may be even more than it was. I mean, we were worried deeply about the threat of Nazi Germany and Japan. But I think that deep down, at least amongst our leaders, we knew that we were going to prevail because we had the military and industrial might to do so. I think that there's this threat now that could really change the way we live in a permanent fashion unless we do something about it. And finally, one additional comment. Franklin Delano Roosevelt led this nation. He led this nation and he inspired this nation. We have to have inspired leadership. That has always been a key element in moments of crisis. And I believe that this president is rallying the American people and getting their full and wholehearted support.
Let me turn to Andrei Cherny, who does join us. He's with us from Los Angeles, the former speechwriter to Vice President Gore. You with us now, Mr. Cherny? There you are.
Yeah, good to see you, Jeff.
Okay. You heard what Senator McCain had said, and let me put the concern to you in its most impolite terms, okay? Your generation goes ballistic when it can't download music into its Palm Pilot. It expects everything at its fingertips instantly, if not sooner. And it has not had any reason to have had anything expected of it. And so I'll put to you the question I put to Senator McCain. Are you confident that this generation, that would, again, through no necessarily fault of your own, has had it as easy as anyone up till now, that this is going to be a tough call?
You know, I am very confident, not actually in spite of what you say, but in many ways because of it. You're right, we're a generation that can't watch TV without remote control. We can't imagine not having a pizza at our front door 30 minutes after we order it. We get impatient when it takes more than a few seconds for a web page to download. We expect a package sent from one side of the country to arrive at another at 10 a.m. the next morning. And yet, at the same time, we're a generation that is already setting records in terms of community service, in terms of reading tutoring. That's much more likely, 50% more likely to help an elderly neighbor than even young people 15, 20 years ago. We're a generation with a huge amount of civic responsibility. We've stayed away from the political sphere because we see a politics that's fundamentally broken. But at the same time, we've been involved in our communities. We have a huge reservoir of idealism and energy and action. And as Senator McCain pointed out so eloquently before, we have in some ways been waiting for the chance to channel that. Now, whether we like it or not, and we certainly don't like it, now is our not only chance but our responsibility to step up to the plate in the same way the previous generations in the course of American history have.
Andre, many of the people you describe, who I've talked to and others have talked to, who volunteer their time in local projects, as you made the point, they don't connect with national politics because either they think it has nothing to do with them, as you say, it's broken, or it doesn't have any resonance. Could this dreadful act wipe that disconnection out or reconnect your generation to a national cause because of its enormity?
I believe it will by pure necessity. You can no longer think what many people said maybe a year ago, that what happens in the Middle East or what happens in other parts of the world doesn't have any connection to us. We know now that what we should have known all along, that the world's a very small place, and what happens in one nation affects another, what happens in one community affects another, what happens in one neighborhood affects another. The very challenges that are being put to my generation and to young people are the same challenges as you know, Jeff, that were put to the generation that did become the greatest generation. Yes, they lived through the Great Depression, but at the same time, they were the generation that was born and raised in the 1920s, during the Roaring '20s, the age of flappers and a go-go stock market. And yet when the time came, those same young people were the ones who stormed the beaches at Normandy. And what once was the lost generation became the greatest generation. And I think that that's really been the lesson of American history.
Well,
that in every moment of crisis, a generation that has had the responsibility to step up to the plate has done that and has really made this country what it is today.
Richard Reeves, let me put one more possible concern on the table, and it's one you know quite well. You've covered politics and public policy for more than 30 years. We've watched each other grow older together in these respective fields. You have seen and chronicled a steady rise, not simply of skepticism, but of cynicism about public life. We've been taught by everyone from the press to late-night comedians to scoff at anything that our leaders say. Can that be turned around now that we are in something approaching wartime, if not wartime itself?
I think it can be turned around, but it's up to the leaders. I agree that the problem is not in the character of the American people. This all began for me out in Sag Harbor, which is a town of 2,000 people, and within an hour of the first strike, there were flags on every house in the village, and those flags weren't at half-mast, they were high. People want to fight, and I suspect that young people want to have some role to play that's more important in terms of the world and of history than they have so far, and we don't need the kind of numbers that we needed in World War II.
No, but
we need smaller numbers of higher educated people, and the problem then, I think the will is there right at the moment. It depends on where the leadership of the country takes them, particularly the president, and the decisions are made. We're going to attack somebody. We're going to bomb someplace. There's no question about that. The question is, where are we going to do it and why? And there'll be plenty of people to do it, willing, happy to do it.
The question I'm raising, Richard, and then I want to hear what Senator McCain has to say, because he's already mentioned this point, that it's not simply that Americans want to support their people, their fallen, their country. It's that don't they have to believe that leaders are to be followed, leaders are to be trusted. And you've had 30 years or more of a message, partly the political system's fault, that says, to quote Mr. Bob Dylan, don't follow leaders. Can people raised with that kind of cynicism say, okay, now I believe what you're telling me?
Well, President Giuliani did fine for the first couple of days while we tried to find the other one. Yes, I don't think the cynicism is that deep, because it was more ennui than cynicism. They had no reason to care about things. I think the cynicism may come further down the road, and Bush's great opportunity and obligation is to educate the American people as to what's happening and to truly, not just to bomb Iraq and bomb Afghanistan, but what is the role of people like Saudi Arabia, of Pakistan, of Egypt in this? If we go and attack the old enemies, then there will be great cynicism in the country, because sooner or later it will become apparent that it wasn't these people who attacked the United States. It was a much bigger operation, well-financed, probably from places like Saudi Arabia, which has been exporting its fundamentalism to protect the royal family for all this time, exporting it first to Afghanistan with Pakistan's help and with our help, and now they've exported their fundamentalist problem to the United States.
Senator McCain, this raises, I think, a point that we sometimes overlook, I guess, historically, that there are times that when a war is prosecuted, and there's always early support, and it drags on, it stalemates, we get bogged down, we're waist deep in the big muddy, support begins to ebb. It happened in Korea, it certainly happened in Vietnam. So is Richard Reeves right in pointing out that if this, whatever we do, is not executed with precision and intelligence and real consistency, that risks returning the country to a more cynical or divided state?
I think there's that risk, and that's why I believe the President of the United States has and is and must say to the American people, this is a long twilight struggle. This is going to take time and patience. I guess tomorrow we could launch a bunch of cruise missiles and everybody might feel good for a few days, but we all know that that's not a very effective, in fact, singularly ineffective method of responding to these kinds of situations. So we've got to have patience. I think the other thing I think here domestically we really have to be concerned about it, and that is some kind of rise of anti-Middle Eastern sentiment. Here in Arizona today in Phoenix, there was a couple of drive-by shootings of people who appear to be Middle Eastern. The president and all of us have to tell people, look, we're different. And the reason why we're different is because we embrace and we love all of our citizens, and for us to somehow engage in this activity is really a terrible thing, and we've got to guard against that right now. One thing that Richard Reeves alluded to, one of the rare moments of humor we've had, is the reference to President Giuliani. You referred to leadership. It's striking, isn't it, how what Mayor Giuliani has done in the last 4 days. Can you put your finger on it? Is it possible to describe it in a sentence? Because it certainly is everywhere. Visibility, relate to the people of New York City. The people of New York City know Rudy Giuliani, and they know he may have some warts, but they know that he's a very efficient and capable guy. I happen to think he's a wonderful leader. I'm wondering if they're going to repeal the term limits that keeps him from running again. Well, you anticipated a question about whether the Congress would have a sense of the Congress resolution to do just that. You guys can't react. Governor Pataki has done well. Both New York senators, Senator Schumer and Senator Clinton, have done well. I think New Yorkers can be very proud. You know, we look at New Yorkers as the most cynical people in the world, and yet we've seen displays of heroism that are writing chapters in American history. Mr. Cherney, I have a son who's not that much younger than you, which attests to the early start of your career. And I must say, as a father, one of the things that hit me in the first hours of this is that my son's life, for at least the foreseeable future, may well be radically different from the life that he or I or anyone would have imagined of his generation. Personally, you're just starting out your own career. Are you feeling that you woke up, or by Tuesday at noon, you saw your life taking a route that you and your generational friends could never, in your wildest nightmare, have imagined? Has it hit you?
It certainly has. You know, I wrote a book earlier this year called The Next Deal, about really where America needs to go and where my generation needs to go. And a lot of what I said there is still true, but it's a very different America, I think, than the America I was foreseeing that my generation would live in. We really never have asked, as no generation has asked, for really a life of comfort and ease. But what the world that's been handed to us and the world as it's changed after September 11th is a world really where we're going to be called forth to do what previous generations in times of challenge and crisis have had to do. You know, the heroes that John McCain just described, the people who, firefighters and emergency medical professionals and police officers who rushed into the building as everybody else was rushing out, those were people in their 20s and 30s. They were from this young generation. They're the ones who risked their lives, who lost their lives by the hundreds, perhaps the thousands. They're the ones who are really representing what I think this generation is made of. I think nobody looks for this type of responsibility placed on their shoulders, but I think it's the responsibility of my generation, as it is the responsibility of those older than us, to lead and to do their part. to really make sure that our mark on history is as great as that other generations have left in previous